Hello, my name is Tendai Manombo, and this is Real Talk. The Procurement Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe has been under fire lately about the procurement processes and how certain stakeholders end up getting tenders while others lose out. Today we have Mr. Cliff Gondo, the Director of Capacity Research at PREZ. He's here to help us get an understanding of the processes and how some of the decisions of the authority come about. Please stay tuned for more. Thank you so much for joining us, Cliff. Welcome to our show.
Thank you, Tendai.
All right. Cliff, please may you explain to us what PREZ is and what is the PREZ mandate in the delivery of public services?
Okay. Thank you very much for that question, Tendai. PREZ stands for the Procurement Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe, and PREZ is part of the reforms that were ushered in by the government of Zimbabwe in 2018 involving public finance management. The main function of PREZ is basically to control and regulate the manner in which public procurement is conducted in Zimbabwe for the purposes of ensuring that it is transparent, fair, honest, cost-effective, resulting in value for money. So by and large, that is the function of PREZ.
All right. Please take us through the public procurement process in Zimbabwe.
Basically, the public procurement process in Zimbabwe since 2018 are now very much in line with international best practice.
All right.
What is basically now provided for is that all state entities, when they want to engage in their procurement processes, they've got an array of different procurement methods. Maybe let me give a bit of background. Prior to this act, public procurement was centralized, where you had the SPB. And the problem with SPB was that there was no accountability.
Okay, just please expand on what SPB is.
That is the State Procurement Board.
Yes.
So when procurement is centralized, when things go off the tracks, it was difficult to apportion responsibility.
All right.
I'm sure you've heard stories about wrong things being procured in the country, and it was always difficult to now investigate and say, look, who is responsible for that? So the reforms that were ushered in decentralized procurement to the entities.
Okay.
So currently, the public procurement is entirely the responsibility of state entities, ministries and agencies. So, for instance, if a local authority wants to buy their things, it's entirely their responsibility. The Act requires that they plan and match their plan to their budgets. Now, the role of PREZ is to ensure that that plan is reviewed. So we review the plan for purposes of ensuring that some of the processes are lengthy by design. So where a local authority needs a vehicle, say in August. So sometimes we say, look, in terms of their plans, they must start the process early so that they advertise, they do all sorts of things. So let me also hasten to mention that there are different procurement methods. The most popular one, or the most recommended one, is the competitive method.
All right.
The Act's main objectives are, one, that procurement must be transparent, it must be fair, it must also be competitive, where bidders in the country, internationally, must compete to supply the government. So state entities must advertise, must publicize their rules to attract bidders. And so that's the preferred method. But however, there are instances where there's no time to advertise, yes. Say, such as during Cyclone Idai. You can't expect people to be advertising for a specific period of time.
Yes, because it's a time of crisis.
It's a time of crisis. COVID is also another example. So there are other methods. It's like if we're in this studio and we want to get out, the preferred method is through the door. Yes. But if there's a fire, the windows become also an option. So the same with procurement method. The preferred one is each time a state entity, it must be competitive. If I want to use studio services as PREZ, You are not the only media company in Zimbabwe, so we must advertise and make you compete for that. However, if it's an emergency and we need to broadcast something, we can use what we call direct procurement, where we come directly to you based on our market intelligence, our market knowledge that you are capable of doing the job. You know, so those methods are provided. They also work in instances such as when, for purposes of continuation, if we have started this program and we now need to do part 2 of the interview.
Yes.
The law says, look, instead of looking for somebody else who will start to do background checks and all that, why don't we go back to the person that we started with?
Right, because the relationship is there already and to save time as well.
And also there could be problems of incompatibility, especially with certain systems, ICs, security systems, information technology systems. Sometimes you don't want to change, you know. And also with vehicles. You know, there's what we call OEM, original equipment manufacturer. Once you have got a Toyota, you can't fit parts from other, you know. So those various methods are also provided for in instances where competitive methods do not work.
Okay, so what are the legal provisions and guiding principles that inform public procurement in Zimbabwe?
Yeah.
What we've just been going through, but then just expanding more on it.
Okay. The main legal provision, the legal framework is the Act. It has got also regulations.
Yes.
You know, so there are basically 5 objectives in the Act. It goes beyond just wanting a procurement system that is transparent, fair, cost-effective, and results in value for money. It talks about competition. It talks about integrity of the processes as well. It also talks about what we call equal and equitable treatment of bidders.
Okay.
Where we treat bidders, this is potential suppliers, the Act says we must treat them equally. But there are instances where we can't treat you equally. You know, where, for instance, the Act specifically mentions under Section 29 that there are youth-owned businesses.
Yes.
There are women-owned businesses. We can't make you compete on the same starting line as the established companies.
Okay. Yes.
So the Act has got provisions to cater for the special interest groups as well. Then it also talks about, overall, we are looking at value for money. How do we achieve value for money? It touches on issues such as also, let's look at what we call life cycle costs. It's not about buying things that are cheap. The government does not buy cheap things. It wants to buy things that result in value for money. So sometimes you find government actually opting to buy a vehicle that you think it's expensive, but it's because it has got it's a better fuel consumption, it's more durable, and so on and so forth.
All right.
So all these other provisions are provided for in the Act. And it talks about also how to buy consultant services. It talks about also a code of conduct for the officers. Remember, public procurement is heavily associated with corruption.
Yes.
So there are provisions in terms of how public officers should behave, and also issues to do with conflict of interest. It also talks about issues to do with integrity of the processes, which is also very important. Suppose you participate in a bidding process and you lose, the Act affords you an opportunity to challenge. In the same manner that you were told that there is a tender by PREZ,
yes,
you must also be told that you lost and so has won. And you are given there's a standstill period during which you should complain before we sign a contract with the winner.
Oh, so that's important to know.
So these are provisions that are meant to bring about integrity, so that losing bidders are afforded the opportunity to complain. But this is like a double-edged sword. In an inflationary environment, it means that prices could go up whilst we're waiting for you to complain.
Yes.
So
that's
sometimes
a
you find
that
is the disadvantage. So sometimes the English say you can't have your cake and eat it. So some of the things that we want that improve integrity, that improve transparency, tend to slow down the processes. But I always look at them like speed humps, whereby they're good to control those that want to speed up. But sometimes we're in a hurry.
And we just want to go.
They slow you up.
All right. Okay, thank you so much for that clarity. We're just going to take a short break and we'll be back after this.
Thank you.
Welcome to our second segment. Thank you so much for staying tuned in. We're here with Cliff from PREZ, and we're just talking about the procurement processes in Zimbabwe. So Cliff, tell us, apparently research has shown that the bulk of public resource leakages in Zimbabwe are linked to the procurement processes, despite the country having legal and institutional frameworks to safeguard this. What is your comment on this?
Okay. Look, it depends with who did the research in terms of, but if it's credible research and they're saying that, I would say we still have challenges of what I call price gouging, where when people are bidding for government contracts, they inflate prices. Mm-hmm. And the explanatory variables are many, but part of it could be we are accused of delays in payment. So the private sector, through speculative behavior, through risk management behavior, mm-hmm. each time they are quoting the government, something that they will quote the private sector for, say, $10, when we go into the market, when we advertise, prices are always inflated. Mm-hmm. Regrettably, we can't be seen to be going to the cheaper person when they don't want to participate in the competitive processes.
So it's out of your control. The leakages are out of your control, really.
Yeah. Leakages that are linked to exorbitant prices are really out of our control. I'll give you, maybe for me to be more specific, if a government department wants to buy a vehicle today, say a Toyota Hilux, that is going for 80,000. We all know that it's going for 80,000, but the rules say that we advertise so that we attract as many people that are selling vehicles as possible. Mm-hmm. You find from the people that would have participated, probably the cheapest vehicle is actually 90,000. So there are chances that they're either colluding or they're saying the government does not pay them on time, they're inflating their prices. And this is what I'm saying. It takes the private sector to explain that. I can't provide the explanation why they quote exorbitant prices to the government.
All right, so let's just talk about the reports. You're familiar with the reports of the Office of the Auditor General. The AG perennially exposes cases of payment of goods not delivered by various government agencies. Why is this so?
Okay. Yeah. Basically, again, these answers should be provided by the private sector. What we see is the private sector approaches government and says, look, we don't have capacity, pay us in advance. Okay. And sometimes government listens to that and say, look, we are repairing roads and we need the roads fixed under the various programs. Mm-hmm. And some of the contractors now say, look, can we be paid in advance? Can we, so that we can mobilize equipment? Regrettably, sometimes when these people are paid this advance payment, they disappear with the money and they don't deliver.
Okay, so in this chain of events, where does PREZ stand?
Okay. As PREZ, because the responsibility for procurement lies with the PE, mm-hmm. what we expect is each time a state entity pays an amount or pays for a contract, there must be a contract signed somewhere. The rules say that there must be a contract. So where a private sector supplier has failed to deliver, it's actually in breach of a contract. So there's the legal route. If they come to PREZ, we can also debar those bidders from participating in public contracts. Okay. So each time we have a bidder, a state entity that is saying that there's a bidder who has failed to deliver on a contract, we need that to be reported to us. We follow due process, which affords the bidder to also explain why they failed to deliver. Mm-hmm. Then the result of that investigation would determine, and the penalties are like debarment, where we can suspend you for 3 months, for 6 months, for a year, or into, where you're permanently debarred from participating in government tenders.
All right. Okay. So these are the only measures that you have to just clip these irregularities. Is there anything else that you can do to just make sure that we keep the irregularities contained?
Yeah, it depends with the irregularities, mm-hmm. whether they are actually of a criminal nature.
Okay.
In the current Act, Section 94 criminalizes certain offences.
Okay.
Especially
I was about to ask about that.
With corruption. whereby we are looking at it becomes a criminal case, and it should also be reported. But by and large, the biggest sanctions that are there are debarment, where companies and their directors, if found guilty of or some of these misdemeanors, are barred from participating in public procurement process. If you go onto the PREZ website, there's a provision where we list debarred, bidders. But for the system to work, we need state entities to report errant bidders. We need them to bring the cases to highlight the cases of malpractice, cases of non-performance, and so on.
So the fight against corruption is really everyone's job. It's not just, it doesn't just lie with PREZ, it doesn't just lie with ZAC or TIZ. Everyone has to be a participant, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you so much. We're just going to take one last break and we'll be back after this. Thank you so much for staying tuned. This is our third and final segment. We're here with Cliff from PREZ, just getting a firm understanding of the procurement processes in Zimbabwe. Now, Cliff, some sections of society claim that PREZ is often bypassed by the executive for big tenders. What are your comments on this?
I think part of the challenge in Zimbabwe is a lack of understanding of public procurement rules. The Act is very specific that there are certain tenders that are actually exempted from application of the Act. The law provides that if we are getting funding from, say, the World Bank, these international financial institutions, the agreement may state that procurement processes must follow their rules. Because they'll be providing the funding, you'll find that PREZ will be not part of that.
Okay.
Bilateral arrangements also, where government-to-government deals will exclude PREZ. So in terms of...
Not at all. You don't even go through the paperwork. You are completely cut off from this arrangement.
Because it would have been negotiated at a government-to-government level, and these things are ratified by Parliament. But it is provided for in the law that as Zimbabweans, we must abide by laws that went through Parliament.
So in such instances, you're saying PREZ's hands are tied?
I wouldn't say they are tied, because there will be rules that will apply to, I'm not saying where the rules of the Procurement Act does not apply, there are no rules. For instance, I will make reference to World Bank rules.
Okay.
They've got rules that are very similar to ours, but sometimes, or African Development Bank, where they provide financing, so there will be certain rules that will apply. Where there are government-to-government arrangement, they will also be concluded in terms of how the negotiations were done. I've had instances where sometimes the government of China is providing aid to Zimbabwe, and part of that, arrangement is that they will bring, say, spare tires and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And people will now say, look, where are spare tires coming from China?
But it's all part of the contract.
The contract.
Okay, so then, all right, I understand. So the government must adhere to that, and PREZ must not interfere
with that.
All right.
Maybe another example that I could also mention, not really with the big tenders, it's also, in terms of exemptions, to do with things such as employment contracts, whereby the Act will not try and say if a top civil servant, as part of their contract of employment, they negotiate that they get certain benefits, like, say, a particular laptop, a particular cell phone. So you find that if we are to apply the rules, it says, look, you don't state a brand. Because, like, say, the objective being that if the moment you state a brand, like we want a writing pen, and we say Eversharp, it means Big cannot participate,
Yes.
the other brand. So when government is buying, we don't specify brands. We simply say we want a pen that writes well, that dispenses the ink well, and so on and so forth. So that Eversharp, Big, and all these will participate. But whereas civil servant has already said, look, as part of my conditions of service, I will be using an Eversharp pen. Mm-hmm. The Act will not apply to that because it's already, a contractual. We don't also break the labor laws.
All right, okay.
So sometimes I urge the public to understand that when they look at the contracts, these so-called big tenders, how did they emanate?
Okay. There's usually a backstory to these big contracts, the big tenders. It's not just what you see is what you get.
Thank you very much.
All right. We needed to understand that. Now, there's a game we play on this show. So what happens is a guest will ask a question to the guest coming on the next episode. And then you answer a question, and then in turn you ask a question to the next guest. So the last guest asked this question: how do you make the youth part of the conversation around economic justice? How do we make the youth part of the conversation around economic justice?
Yeah, that's a very difficult one. I'm glad there are no words limit to answering that one. Having had the honor of working with young people in universities, I think anything to do with the youth, we need to involve them. They know what they want. And the biggest mistake we can do is to constantly try to tell them how we used to do things.
Okay,
so if we really want to involve them, I think we simply ask them what they want. Dialogue with them.
Right.
We can't talk about anything and think that we know it all. I tell my colleagues after working at the universities that we don't understand how these people work. If they are passionate about anything, they can achieve anything. We just have to trust them.
All right. Okay. So it's an issue of trust, really.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a great answer. What's your question to our next guest?
To the next guest.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I'd known this in advance. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we have now is about the issues to do with climate change, the issue to do with sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a country we are not doing enough. And my question will be, as Zimbabwe, there's more that we should be doing. And there's very little that we're doing. So any suggestions of how we can get also these young people involved in issues to do with sustainability?
Okay. All right. That's a very interesting question, and I'm sure our guest is going to find it a little bit difficult because, like you're saying, it's not something that we talk about frequently. It's not something that we talk about that we're hammering on like we're doing on other topics. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us. We know you're very busy and you took the time to come to our studio and join us and just explain on these issues, because the bulk of the population doesn't really know or have a firm understanding of the processes around procurement. So thank you so much for
You're welcome.
this.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much to our viewers. We've come to the end of our show today. Please join us once again next week.